If you're watching this, HR has probably already let you down, or you can feel in your gut that they're about to. You're not paranoid, you're paying attention. I've spent nearly 2 decades in HR. I've run all kinds of investigations, and then I've even become a target myself of workplace abuse and had to figure out how to navigate this from every conceivable side. My promise to you is in the next few minutes, I'm going to hand you a step-by-step plan that you can start running today, with or without HR or management on your side. I want to show you what you need to document, what evidence you need to collect, how you need to communicate your concerns in writing, and one of the best moves to quietly shift the pressure off of you and back onto the company. I began my career in Washington, D.C. as a diplomat with the U.S. State Department. So early on, I was exposed to some pretty big egos and some people who weren't always nice to other folks. But I had the good fortune of working with a lot of really strong individuals who showed courage in these spaces. And I was lucky enough to know to try and carry that with me through the rest of my career. And over the years, I ran into a lot of tough instances. There were times where I had to investigate my boss and start investigations into board members, the people who signed my paycheck. And yes, there were a lot of veiled threats, a lot of not so veiled threats, but by and large, I survived the process and I learned an enormous amount along the way. Ultimately, though, I did end up becoming a target of a chief executive. And when this happened to me, I knew I couldn't open an investigation on my own at the head of HR because it would appear tainted or biased. And so I went to inside counsel and couldn't get any help. And then I went to the board and I couldn't get any help. In fact, I experienced, some degree of retaliation just for asking. And so it was the first time in my career where I ended up alone. And I really wanted to make sure that this didn't happen to anyone else. It is because of this experience that I have testified before many state legislatures and why I want to carry all of this kind of hidden HR knowledge out into the world and to help you in particular. The most expensive mistake that I see people make over and over is counting on the company to protect them. And when this doesn't happen and we backslide and we backslide and we backslide, we tend to end up in a pretty serious and vulnerable place. Those who fare better in this type of situation tend to get quiet and prepare. So let's contrast two examples. The person who waited, which is what I see over and over again. They kept hoping things would get better. They were too afraid to engage in a hard conversation. They didn't document their experience. We tend to see a slow decline. Their fear kicks up, their anxiety kicks up every time they have to engage with a bully, every time they have to endure any form of workplace misconduct. And so as they do, we see that they sleep less, they perform worse. Studies show that your cognitive abilities are impaired in these types of environments. And so basically the company is handed more and more leverage throughout this process. And so by the time someone ends up asking for help, they've usually reached a desperate place, one where they've already been terminated, one where they have no access to documentation, and one where it's very difficult for someone to help them from that point going forward. Compare that to someone who got quiet and put an entire evidence file together. This person is in a position where they can reach out to an attorney, where they can present their facts calmly and in a way that's very, very difficult to refute. They can use HR-coded language, which is speaking in patterns or speaking in policy and protected characteristics, where they're presenting a timeline of 14 individual events that are not just documented, but connected to evidence. So for the person sitting in HR, these two scenarios show up very, very differently, and they have very, very different outcomes. So you could start with an exact same pain pattern. You could have the same form of workplace abuse, the same fact pattern, but one won't be helped and the other one will. The quiet one, the prepared one, compels action and respect and protection. The one who waits too late, unfortunately, does not. The first thing you should do today, right now, if you have any concerns at all in your workplace, is begin to document. So these can be good old-fashioned handwritten notes. This can be you using something like Claude or your internal AI system to cull through Teams messages, to go through emails, and start putting together a timeline of events. There's a huge difference from someone who shows up and says, Mark Smith did these really serious things 14 times between January 1 and February 2nd. And these were the people who were in the room. And here are copies of the Teams messages. That kind of presentation would be really, really helpful, whether you act on it or not. And part of the reason for that is because it gives you clarity into what's happening, and it helps you get your facts straight before you ever utter a word. And so this could be something simple as writing down notes. Contemporaneous notes tend to do best in an investigation, and contemporaneous is really just a fancy word for you captured it in the moment, because people tend to forget things over time. Also, look through what you can collect off your work device. Don't break any company policies. Don't do any of this on your work computer. But look through, go through emails, go through Teams messages or Slack notices, and start to pull together a timeline of events. Here's what these things should include. It should include the date, the time, anyone else that was present on a call or CC'd in that conversation, so that you have a list of witnesses. You also just want to put together the very bare minimum facts. You don't want to add any color. You don't want to add any emotion. You want whatever wrongdoing that happened to stand entirely on its own. There's also great tools that you can use for this. In some cases, you may have AI that is connected to your entire ecosystem that can pull through and do some of the heavy lifting for you. There's also great apps out there on the market like Work Receipts, which will help you build up a case file that is easy to convert and to track. But the most important thing is no adjectives, no venting, just the facts, because this is where the company is going to lose control of the record. And critically important is to store it off your work device. If you're in a really tenuous situation and you could be called into a meeting and terminated, you could lose access to all of that information, and it is incredibly difficult to get that back. So make sure that you're capturing everything either on your phone or on a personal laptop, so should anything happen that you still have access to that. So if we go back to the two examples where we had one who waited too long and let their emotions and their stress build, they're speaking in feelings, and a feeling is very easy to dismiss. And so a lot of times when you have a manager or a person in HR and they're hearing these complaints, they're digging for what are the concrete things that I can hang my hat on here? What can I push forward and what can I not push forward? If we compare that to someone who's talking about a policy violation, that can't be ignored. So we want to move out of this space where we're simply saying, my boss is impossible or difficult, and start naming it in a way that the company is obligated to hear. So one of the best things that we can do is pull out our company handbook. Almost every organization has a code of conduct policy, a respectful workplace policy, or some form of anti-retaliation language. And so we want to find the exact lines that their behavior is breaking, the rules that they're violating. Because when we bring this complaint forward, this is the exact language that we want to bring with it. If any of the negative experiences that you're documenting are connected in some way to a protected category, so for example, your race, your sex, age, or disability, or if you started noticing changes in behavior right after you reported something, like being excluded from meetings or noticing an uptick in the hostility in the work environment, well, that is really significant to put down, because these are words that can turn your problem into actual legal exposure for the company. And so with all of this, you are not exaggerating, you are simply translating. So we also really want to look for patterns. One incident is an incident and maybe can be explained away as just an incident. But 15 entries across 4 months, each dated, factual, lined up in order, is a pattern of conduct. And a pattern is almost impossible to wave away. So put your record on a timeline. What happened, when, who saw it, and what it cost you. Was there a project that you were pulled off, a meeting that you were cut out of, the review that suddenly dropped? 2 things happen when you see it laid out like this. 1, you will stop doubting yourself, and anyone you show it to, whether that's an investigator, someone internally, or even a lawyer from outside your organization, can see this in 10 seconds and understand the pattern versus having to compile something over 10 months. So one of the beautiful things about putting a timeline together is more than just organizing your facts and your thoughts. You're now starting to speak HR code, because you want to present your situation in a very serious way, in such a serious way that HR, the top of an organization, or their outside defense counsel will really kind of perk up when they see that. Because what you're also doing with the timeline is you're saying you're making this ready to speak to an attorney. That this is someone that is put together information in a compelling enough way that they may be able to find support outside the organization or outside their sphere of control. So once you have that timeline, at that point, and only at that point, do you report. And you do it with the understanding that it may have taken you years to say that out loud, but that's okay. At the end of the day, there are lots of good people in HR, and I was one of them, that are rooting for you, that want to protect you, that want to help you. But the function itself is clearly designed to reduce liability and to protect the organization. And so most of the people in these seats may want to work with you, but the way the structure exists protects the organization. So you want to make protecting you the lower risk option. And we do this by putting the complaint in writing. And it does not have to be as scary as it sounds. I know for a lot of people, they think that the second they write it down, they're escalating, they're poking the bear. But you can do this in a very calm, factual way where you're just pointing to an exact policy, stating it plainly, and then asking what you're wanting them to do. A vague complaint, of course, gets a vague response, but a specific documented written complaint creates an obligation to act and a record that they were told. The moment you report, you want to watch for anything that turns. A cold shoulder, a schedule change, a bad review out of nowhere. Retaliation after you speak up is often stronger than the original problem, so you want to document it the same way. But the most important thing here is that all of this can be done with neutral language. It does not have to come across as threatening. And if anything, the other side of this table has seen this way more often than you have. And it may not be the jarring experience that it can feel like for you. And even with that, if you were still sitting there thinking, this is a lot, this is a little too scary, or my situation is way more complicated than a list, that's okay. And that's exactly what we do at the Fair Path. That's exactly what I do. I help people one-on-one. And there's a link in the description if you want it. Now let's keep going. So what hurts so many people is when something's said out loud in a hallway, in a break room, where there's kind of no trace. And it gets us into this he said, she said situation where it can be really difficult to prove something occurred and somebody has the obvious out of denying that a conversation happens. So after any significant verbal conversation, you want to send a short, polite, factual follow-up email. So it could be something that is nice, non-threatening, and respectful, like just confirming our conversation today. You mentioned I'm going to be moved off the Reynolds account, and you asked me to hand over my files. Please let me know if I have that wrong, or we'll follow up on that later today. So now they either confirm it, correct the record, or ignore it. And all three of those help you. You're not being aggressive, you're being thorough, and thorough is what survives. At this point, where the smartest, calmest move is to stop pouring energy into a channel that was never going to help you, it may be wise to bring someone whose actual job is to be on your side. And there's a whole world out there that can potentially help you. A consultation with an employment attorney is often free, many work on contingency, and many only get paid if you do. You also want to consider speaking with a doctor. You also want to consider speaking with a therapist if it's really reaching a point where it's affecting you. Any record that's outside of an organization's control is going to be really, really helpful the further you walk down this path. There are also independent HR consultants, someone not employed by your company, who can also help you read the field. So this is where that timeline really pays off. So if you can walk into an outside advocate, even if it is an attorney, and you're doing this with a clean, organized, documented record instead of a tearful story, you make their job easier and your position stronger inside the first 10 minutes of a conversation. And it can be the difference between getting help or not. So one of the biggest things to pay attention to with all of this is fear. Everyone's afraid in a moment where there's a complaint. HR is afraid, managers are afraid, you're likely afraid, and this takes a real toll on you as an individual. This can go beyond the Sunday night dread, the sleeplessness, the way your body clenches up when a certain name appears in your inbox. None of this is weakness. It's actually a normal human response to an abnormal situation. And you're allowed to take that seriously. In fact, those who fare best in these types of environments do treat it seriously. So lean on the people who are safe. Talk to that therapist if you can. The whole reason you build this record is so that you don't have to carry this in your body anymore. Once it's written down and safely stored, you're allowed to set it down too. So you may not be able to make HR systems fair or your company culture fair. You cannot control whether they do the right thing, and you should stop spending your one life waiting on them to. But the record, the clear, factual, well-stored account of what actually happened to you is the one thing in this entire machine they do not get to write, edit, or make disappear. So build it, starting today. And if you are in the middle of this right now and you want a second set of eyes on your specific situation, this is exactly the work that I do. I work with people one-on-one to build this out and decide their next move. The link to book a consultation is in the description.